Hello, and welcome to the Cloudian HyperIQ demo. HyperIQ provides IT professionals with data and actionable insights to monitor their Hyperstore clusters, respond to system-wide performance changes, optimize resource utilization, and get a unified view of operational health. HyperIQ collects monitoring and operational data from logs, system metrics, and events, providing you with a unified view of user and system resource activity. Let's dive in and highlight some of the newer features which have been added recently. Cloudian offers MultiCluster Monitoring, along with monitoring object lock transactions to help enhance protection against things like ransomware. Cross-region Replication Monitoring, and all these can be fed into the new custom alerting feature, and to tie everything together in the enterprise, HyperIQ has LDAP Integration. Let's get started by looking at MultiCluster Monitoring. From the main dashboard in HyperIQ, you can drill down into either the clusters, the regions, the data centers, or into individual nodes being monitored. We can go back and select one of the clusters and take a look. This limits our view to just the nodes within that cluster. We can further drill down into an individual node if we want. We can also go back and select multiple clusters at the same time. We can then reset back to all the nodes for both those clusters. When we have a selection, we can dive into some of the services and analytics that are available. Here we can get a good deep understanding of what is happening in the cluster. Now we can take a look at monitoring object lock transactions. The object lock transactions are located under the S3 Analytics dashboard. We can now select a cluster where object lock is enabled. We can then scroll down to find the panel for worm transaction info. Here we can zoom in on the panel and get a look. We can, if we want, drill into a time range which is more interesting for us. We can now see all the object lock transactions that are going on per bucket inside the Hyperstore. Monitoring cross-region replication within HyperIQ. Cross-region replication is located under the S3 Analytics tab. We can scroll down and expand the CRR Operation Info panel. Here, we can take a look at the operation count, operation size, and duration per bucket. We can open up any one of these panels for CRR. Once our panel is open, we can zoom in on a timeline at a point of interest. If we choose to go any further, we can zoom in another time. If at any point we would like to back out of our zooming in, we can go to the upper right and reset the graph period to a different timeline. All this together gives you a good understanding of what your Hyperstore clusters are doing with their CRR workloads. Create custom alerting within the HyperIQ. Custom alerts can be set up by using PromQL, or Prometheus query language. This example will search for 404 HTTP status codes and alert if a threshold is exceeded within a time range. To view custom alerts, you can add /Prometheus/alerts to your HyperIQ URL. Here we can see the sample code loaded as an alert catching 404 status codes. These alerts can be extended to anything that Prometheus is collecting. Additionally, alerts can be sent via email, Slack, or text within your organization. And last, we will cover LDAP AD Integration with HyperIQ. In the HyperIQ GUI, we can click on the gear and choose Users to get a list of all HyperIQ users. We will then try to log in to a user that exists in AD, but not within the HyperIQ instance. We will use HyperIQ Demo 1. This will contact the AD server and authenticate for us. We can switch back to our admin session. Here, we can go back to users and we can refresh the list. And our new HyperIQ demo user now shows. We can further test the integration with AD by logging out of HyperIQ Demo 1 user that we had used previously. On the AD server, we will disable the account HyperIQ Demo 1. We will then attempt to log into the HyperIQ GUI with HyperIQ Demo 1. This should fail since the account is now disabled within the domain. We can then go back to the AD system and we can re-enable the HyperIQ Demo 1 account. Once this is done, we can go back into our HyperIQ and attempt to log in again. This will now go through for us. And now we are back inside HyperIQ. And that covers 5 of the new features in the latest version of HyperIQ. Thank you for your time.